Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming. We're just going to take a second to let everyone join in. I'm going to, okay. Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Corinthia, and I'm going to be your coffee guide today. I'm going to be taking you through step by step how to prepare and taste our coffees today. This is supposed to be like a super relaxing experience. So hopefully, what we do today doesn't get too overwhelming. Just have confidence in yourself and believe that you can do more than you think you can, even if you've never done a coffee tasting before. If you're if you're drinking coffee regularly, you should be able to pick up on a couple of things. Even if those things aren't specific, you'll be able to pick out a couple of things during our tasting today. I am going to share my screen here just to make sure that everyone is set up and make sure that everyone has what they need. So let me do that. All right. So this is all that you're going to need today. If you received whole bean coffee, you will need a grinder and you will need to grind that coffee. If you received pre-ground coffee, no worries, you're ready to do the next step, which is to grab 5 mugs that can hold at least 7.5 ounces of water or any liquid. And you're going to be putting 12 grams or 2 tablespoons of coffee in each of those cups. You also want to make sure that your water is heating up. You want it to heat to 205 degrees Fahrenheit or 96 degrees Celsius. And real quick, before I go past the pouring the coffee in the cups, you're putting 1 coffee in each mug. And I definitely suggest putting the coffee bag behind the mug that you poured the coffee into, just so you can remember which coffee is which. You're going to need an additional 2 mugs as well, so 7 mugs total. And the other 2 mugs are not for coffee, they're for something else. And they do not have to be able to hold 7.5 ounces. They just need to be able to hold at least some liquid. And you need 2 spoons, and these spoons can be any size, but it is very helpful if they are the same size. If you're using your kitchen spoons, then I suggest using the smaller of the 2 sizes that typically come in the kitchen set. But whatever you choose, just get 2 spoons of the same size to help out with what we will be using the spoons for later. You need a writing utensil, your tasting form and flavor wheel, and of course a scale, tablespoon, or measuring pitcher. These are going to be used for weighing, measuring out coffee, water, all of that. So this is all that you're going to need. Over our time together, this is what we're going to be doing. We're going to start off by smelling our coffee grounds dry. And that is called the fragrance. And then we will brew the coffee together, and I'll show you exactly how to do that. So no prior knowledge needed. And then we will actually smell the coffee again while our coffee is brewing, or steeping in this case. And that is called the aroma. So with the coffee, we will be brewing directly into these cups. And like it says, pour hot water and steep. This coffee will be brewing more like a tea, in that we're going to let the coffee grounds steep in the water, as opposed to the traditional version of making coffee where you run the coffee, you put the coffee in a filter and run water through that filter. Everything's going to be in the cup today. Then we will taste the coffee, talk about it, and we'll use the rest of our tasting form to do that. And then I will reveal to you where your coffees are from. Just a little bit about the roaster of your coffee today while you finish setting up. Your coffee is from Driftaway. Driftaway is a Brooklyn-based roaster focused on sustainability and, of course, single origin delicious coffees. All of the items in your box are either compostable or recyclable, so you have different options of how to discard your items today. And if you have any questions throughout this tasting about the coffee specifically, I ask that you hold them to the end. But if you have any questions about the process, I ask that you ask those immediately, just so that I don't leave anyone behind. But Yeah, I might be asking you different coffee questions throughout. And if you have a response question, that's fine. I'm not saying you can't ask any questions, but I do want to get us through this. And I don't want to give away too much of my opinions about the coffees either. So you may hear me agree or disagree or say, or, something like that as we go through and smell or taste the coffees. But that doesn't mean you have like the right answer or the wrong answer. And we'll talk about that here in just a second. But this again is supposed to be relaxing, so please don't get too caught up in trying to smell the right thing or taste the right thing. It's all subjective anyway, so we will just be going through this together, sharing our thoughts as we go, and hopefully you'll learn a lot more about yourself and about coffee. Okay, so to start, let's pull out that tasting form and flavor wheel and just talk about that for a little bit, and then we will begin tasting the coffee. So, oh, and I do also want to say again, make sure your hot water is heating up. If you're using a stovetop kettle, again, we want the water around 206 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's about 3 to 5 minutes off boil. If you don't have a thermometer and you're just using your stovetop kettle, once it reaches boil, just go ahead and grab that off. And I'll also remind you right before we're going to need to use it. So you'll be ready to go. There's something in the cup. Okay, so grab your tasting form and let's talk a little bit about that, as well as your flavor wheel. So the first column of the tasting form is what we're going to be focused on first. I said this jargon before, but this is our fragrance and aroma column. And fragrance is just how the coffee smells dry. Aroma is how the coffee smells once it's saturated. And we're going to be taking note of both. What exactly are you looking for when you're smelling? You're looking for anything that you pick up. This is very subjective. There's no right or wrong answers. And a lot of what you smelled in the past can dictate what you smell today. So just go with your gut on what you're smelling. Even if your gut's like, I only smell coffee, they all smell the same, that's totally okay. If you feel like you are picking up a smell, but you're just not quite sure what it is, that's where the flavor wheel can come in. The flavor wheel can come in and help you narrow things down. The outer ring of the flavor wheel is going to be your more general terms. So fruity, nutty, sweet, things like that. And the closer you get to the center, the more specific. So you go from fruity to a specific berry, or you go from nutty to a specific nut like cashew or whatever it is. But more than anything, just trust yourself. And if you feel like they all smell like coffee, that's totally fine. Once we pour the water on the coffee, though, I feel like you will be able to tell the difference in the coffees, even if you're not sure what that difference is. And at that point, if you still are like, they still all smell the same, that's also okay. Once we taste them, I promise they do not all taste the same. You'll be getting a different experience from each coffee. So, are there any questions before we begin? Okay, so how we smell our coffee is you just pick up a cup, any cup, just remember which one you picked up if there's two of you together. And you're gonna just shake your coffee or tap it on your palm and take short, bunny sniffs. We're doing short sniffs to avoid the coffee flying around. We don't want to take too deep of an inhale because we don't want the coffee to fly into our nasal cavity. And you really don't want to blow into the cup because it'll just poof the coffee all into your face. So just some short bunny sniffs, and whatever you're able to pick up, write it down or put it in the chat and let us know. Just let us know which coffee you're talking about. Give you a few minutes for that. And during this time, if your water reaches boil, you can go ahead and grab it. Okay, we have someone saying that the yellow is a little bit fruity and that they feel like the other four smell the same though. Someone else said that the green stuck out, but the green and the yellow stuck out, but the rest of them kind of smell the same. And that's okay. The purple smells a little smoky. I agree. But you like that. Okay, perfect. This smells like this one, the purple and the green to me are both a little bit more on the traditional side. So when I smell them, I feel like they smell like what I imagine when I think about how coffee smells. And I feel like this is more comforting and more like familiar, the purple and the green. I'll give you just a couple more minutes to smell and taste notes. We'll really like one more minute. And if your hot water is ready, again, you can go ahead and grab it. I'm going to grab mine. We're going to be brewing in just a minute. All right. Okay. Let's move on to our next step. And if you didn't get a ton of tasting smells, smelling notes instead of tasting notes, if you didn't get a bunch of smelling notes, that's totally okay. We will be smelling this coffee again in just a second. And like I mentioned before, some of these might change once they're saturated. So you might have a different thought about them anyway. So we are going to brew our coffee again. We're going to be brewing directly into these cups. And there are three things to note, do, and remember as we do this. First, we want to put enough water in each cup. We want to fill each cup up with at least 7 ounces of water. All right. And while you're pouring your water in, you want to make sure that the coffee is completely saturated. You don't want any dry spots on top of your cup or like on top of your coffee grounds. And to help with that, you can kind of move your cup around as you pour your hot water into your cups. And third, once your water is in the cup, you want to make sure that you do not stir it. It looks very stirrable, and we have the spoons just right here, but we are not stirring it quite yet. We're just putting the water in, making sure it's fully saturated, and letting it sit and brew. And while it's brewing, we will be smelling the coffee again. So whenever you're ready, you can begin. I'm starting with the yellow. You can start with purple if you would like. Once you have water in all 5 of your cups, go ahead and put some water in one of your side mugs that's empty. That's going to be rinsing our spoon. That's going to be for rinsing our spoons. So if you don't have like a lot left in your kettle or whatever you're pouring your water from after you filled up all 5 of your cups, that's okay. You can use tap water, bottled water. It doesn't have to be boiling hot. We just need some water in our side cup to rinse. Okay. While these coffees are brewing, you can go ahead and start smelling. And the way that I recommend smelling is by leaning over your cups rather than bringing them to your face. If you have cups with handles, it's probably going to be a little easier to do. You don't have to worry about your hands being too hot, but you do want to make sure you don't jostle these around too much. So just leaving them on the table is probably the best way to do this. And all you're going to do is lean over and smell the coffee. You can take deeper inhales now that the coffee is saturated. You don't have to worry about it flying all over the place. So just lean over and take a deep breath. It can help to slide one out of the group if you feel like you're having a hard time smelling them while they're so close to each other. But again, just like before, go with your gut, use your flavor wheel. We're gonna let these brew for 2 more minutes, and then we'll move on to our next step. Mm, they all smell very wonderful. You may be able to notice some differences in your coffees just physically, just looking at them. Some may be lighter, some may be darker, some may have like a lighter foam on the top. If any of yours look a little lighter or darker on the top, that's okay. We're gonna give these a couple more minutes, like a minute and a half. All right. So let's move on to our next step. Our next step is called cleaning the cup. What that is, oh, sorry, no, it's not. Our next step is called breaking the crust. Haha. And what that is us essentially stirring this coffee, and that's going to allow a majority of these coffee grounds to fall to the bottom of the cup. And so what we're going to do is you take one of your spoons, dip it in your rinse water, and then put your nose right next to the cup as you do this if you want one last burst of smell. And then you're going to come to the cup, to the side of the cup that's closest to you. You're going to dip your spoon in. And as soon as your spoon starts to take on liquid, you want to push up and give your coffee a few turns. You should be left with the foam on top. And your coffee grounds are going to start to slowly sink to the bottom. We are just stirring the top. We do not want to disturb any grounds that have already fallen to the bottom. So we're just going to stir the top. After you're done stirring, rinse your spoon and go to your next cup. You may notice a difference in the thickness of these coffees as you stir. Your yellow and your red may seem a little different than the other three, and that's totally normal. I'll give you a few minutes to do that. While you finish up, I'm going to start to explain the next part, which is now cleaning the cup. And what that is we are going to scrape the foam off of the top of these cups. This foam is a result of CO2 being released from the coffee while it's brewing, and it's a little bitter. And so that it doesn't obstruct our tastes today, and for our purposes today, we are going to use both of our spoons and we're going to scrape this foam off, and I'm going to show you how. And I will say that this part is a little tricky, but it's not impossible. So don't give up. And if you find a way to do it that does not disturb the grounds on the bottom of the cup, then by all means do that. You don't have to do it the way that I show you, but you do want to get a space clear enough to drink from. It doesn't have to be a completely clear cup, just enough space to drink from. Let's begin. So you take your second spoon and you're gonna dip it in your rinse water. Then you take your spoons, and you just kind of slide them into each other. I find that putting the tips together is where they lay together best. I'm gonna go out with a big V here and go to your cup. You can relax your elbows a little bit now. We're at the top of the cup and we're gonna pull our spoons apart so that they're touching both sides of the inner part of the cup. Then we're gonna drag our spoons down again without disturbing the grounds on the bottom. And we bring them together at the bottom of the cup and scoop that foam out and put it into our empty mug. If you ever make coffee at home and you have like a little foam, that's totally okay. You don't have to do this. This is just for the way that we're tasting today. I have a few floaters in the top of my cup here. And so I'm just gonna gently scoop those out with my spoon, just so that they don't get in my throat when I'm trying to drink here in a minute. Then you move on. Again, this can be tricky, but it's not impossible. Take the time that you need. Once you're done with this, and I'm not rushing you, I'm not even done yet. If you need to replace your rinse water, feel free to do that. If your rinse water just gets a little messy. Just a little closer to me. Okay. While you finish cleaning your cups, I'm going to just talk with you about what we're going to be tasting for while we're tasting our coffee today. Very similar to when we're smelling. The goal is to notice the difference between these as well as to just learn our preferences. So there is no right or wrong answer on the first column that we're going to be doing for tasting, which is flavor. We are just going with what we perceive the coffee to taste like. So if you take a sip and you're like, oh, this kind of tastes like chocolate, and somebody's like, oh, I think it tastes like fruit. That doesn't mean anyone's wrong. It's just what you're experiencing. So go with your gut. And again, use the flavor wheel to help you narrow down what it is that you're tasting. The flavor is just your perception. Body is, and I think on your, you may or may not have it on your tasting form where it has like little descriptors of this up top, at the top of the columns. If you don't, that's okay. I'm explaining them all. If you do, you can refer back to that if you were wondering about them. But ask me any questions about any of this during your tasting time or right after I'm done explaining them. Please make sure you ask. Okay, so body. Body is how the coffee tastes, how the coffee feels in your mouth. So when you take a sip and you swish it around, if it feels watery or tea-like, then that is going to be a lighter body. If it feels dense like whole milk, that's going to be a heavier body. Acidity. Acidity is the perceived brightness. I like to also describe it as how your mouth reacts to the coffee. If you take a sip and it feels mute, like milk, then that's going to be a lower acidity. If you take a sip and it feels like your jaw is clenching or you feel like you're salivating, that's going to be a higher acidity. And last is aftertaste. Aftertaste is just what's left over once you drink your coffee. You're taking note of if the aftertaste is lingering or if it finishes quickly. I like to also mentally know if it tastes good or not. Do I like the aftertaste? Do I not? If not, I might not taste the coffee again or want to drink it again. So I like to just mentally know if I liked it or not. For all of these, please utilize the fact that you have different coffees on the table. So if you're stuck on, let's say, body or acidity, you can use the other coffees to help you kind of figure out what to do. So if you take a sip of blue and you're like, I don't know if this is acidic or not, compare it to 2 or 3 other coffees on the table and see what you think comparatively. I hope that makes sense. Are there any questions about the tasting form before I show you how to taste? Okay, let's go to our tasting portion. So there are 2 ways to taste. How we do in the coffee world is we use the spoon and we slurp from the spoon. But people have told me that they like to drink directly from their cup because that's how they normally drink coffee. And so it's just a little easier to pick out the flavor, body, and all of that, which I understand. So you can try both ways and see what you think. But the way that we try it in the coffee world is with the spoon. But whichever way you try it, you want to do 2 things. You want to, 1, make sure you're slurping. Slurping helps kind of spray the coffee over our entire tasting palette while aerating it, allowing us to pick up on these notes a little bit better. And also just remember there are coffee grounds in the bottom of here. So you don't want to take your spoon and go in too deep, nor do you want to pull your cup back too far. If you get really into one of the coffees, just remember there are grounds at the bottom, so you can't just throw it all the way back. The way that we taste, like I said, is slurping. So if you're using the spoon, you'd rinse your spoon off first and then dip your spoon into the cup. And then you just slurp. The louder the slurp, the better. Yum. And that's all we're doing. We're going through and slurping the coffee. So I will give you all a minute to go through and taste all your coffees. I suggest tasting them at least 3 times each, just to get a good feel for them. You may notice as they cool down that they start to taste a little different. That is very normal. We can talk about that at the end if you would like. But yeah, go in. Remember, supposed to be relaxing. So don't think too hard about it. Just go with your gut. Whatever your gut's telling you, even if it's like, this tastes like coffee, this tastes bad, this tastes good. Whatever comes to your mind, you can take note of that and we can talk about that. And then I will ask you to start sharing your thoughts here in just a minute. Okay, let's talk a little bit about where our coffees are from. And if you have your cards, you should have gotten a box that says do not open in your box. And in that box is some cards, and those cards have a lot more information than what I'm about to share with you today. But it's going to just give you a little bit more info about the coffee and can be very helpful for you if you're looking for a specific coffee later on. So if you like one of the coffees, just remember the information about it, like the origin, the flavor notes, the roasting level, things like that. And that can help you, when you're going to buy more coffee, or you can just take the card with you. But if you have any questions pertaining to something I didn't say, but is on your card, just let me know. Okay, so your yellow coffee today is an Ethiopian natural from the Guji region. And this coffee is our fruity profile, our lightest roast. What does that mean? So here at Driftaway, we roast 5 coffees every month. And the origin of those coffees will change, but the profile will stay the same. So the yellow coffee is always going to be fruity and it's always going to be a light roast, but the tasting notes will be different based on the origin. The purple is always going to be dark and smoky, but the tasting notes will be different based on the origin. So it's a good way to get to try a lot of coffees that you would like, but have different tastes still. So anyway, this is our fruity profile, our lightest roast with tasting notes of jasmine, orange, and green apple. If you're like, I didn't get any of that, that's totally okay. These are more of a guide than anything. So you may have experienced floral, grapefruit, and malic acid just straight up. And that's almost the same thing. So it's really just specific words, but you can kind of be anywhere around those words, just depending on how you experience the flavor of the coffee. And just another note is the fact that this says natural at the top. And what that is how the coffee was processed. Processing is how the coffee is washed and dried. Coffee is a fruit, and the coffee bean, as we know it, is the pit of that fruit. And you can see those fruits here. They are cherries. Oops, let me go back. They have cherries in theirs too. But you can see those cherries here. And what they do in natural processing is when the coffee cherries are picked, they are laid out to dry in the sun completely before the coffee bean is taken out of the center. And then they are washed and then dried again. For washed, the coffee bean is immediately taken out and washed and then laid out to dry. Natural processed coffee tends to be on the fruitier side, and with washed coffee, you can kind of get a big array of flavors, but it tends to be more a little bit, it could be more earthy, more nutty, more chocolatey. That also has to do with the region, but with washed, you won't get as much of that fruity acidic taste in your coffee, but you still could. But typically that's associated with natural, more of that fruity taste. Honduras is the country of origin for our blue coffee. And this is our classic profile, a medium roast with tasty notes of brown sugar, toffee, and milk chocolate. This coffee was supposed to be like if you walked into a coffee shop and said, I'll take 1 cup of coffee, please. A very straightforward, tasty coffee. And you can see that they have, oops, excuse me, excuse me, some coffee cherries drying back here. Excuse me. It looks like they're doing a mix. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. My mouse is clicking forward when I don't want it to. It looks like they're doing a mix of natural and washed here, which is really cool. Okay, there we go. Our red coffee is from Nicaragua with tasting notes of floral, orange, and malt. This is our balanced profile, our light medium roast. It's supposed to be like a middle ground between the yellow and the blue coffee, and that it has some floral notes, but also some sweet notes. Excuse me. Whew, sorry, I'm a little sneezy. Our green coffee is from Guatemala with tasting notes of baking spices, cacao, and black tea. This is our bold profile, our medium dark roast. And I agree with these tasting notes. I know I didn't say anything before on the other ones, but I just feel like this one really spoke to me because I feel like these were notes that I fully agreed with. Some of the others I have just different notes for, but this one I felt like really was a little bit bitter, a little bit spicy, had a little cacao taste to it. I really liked that. And you can see some underripe cherries here, and they just look so pretty. But these are coffee cherries. They are underripe. Some of them are a little bit redder in the back, but this is how they sort of look in the process. Our purple coffee is from Burundi with tasty notes of caramel, cola, and dark chocolate. This is our extra bold profile, our darkest roast. And it definitely has a little bit more smokiness going on with it than I feel like this leads on, but that's okay. That's just my opinion. I feel like I would say it tasted like a burnt marshmallow in that it has like a little smokiness, but still some sweetness as well. The purple and the green tend to be really, really tasty with cream and sugar. So if you're a cream and sugar person, that can be good for you. If you are not, then you have all the choices here. If you do like cream and sugar, I would not suggest putting it in the red or the yellow, but you are obviously more than welcome to do whatever you would like with it. Those are just my suggestions. This coffee is good for a while. You're good for at least 2 months. Just leave it in your bag zipped up or any sort of airtight container you have. After that, the coffee doesn't go bad, but it will start to lose some of its flavor. So I was just telling you that for storage purposes. And that is all that I have for you today. So if you have any questions, you can ask them now.